years childhood experience. You're amazingly close.
Yeah.
And yes, you know.
Most of the time.
Short family, and we generally mean it when it's a short family, because over 10 years we're going to have a big family.
On a grey morning in Windsor, a decision was made that would quietly redefine the British monarchy. No cameras were present, no official statement had been prepared. But inside the walls where kings have ruled for nearly 1,000 years, the future had just separated itself from the present. Prince William and Princess Catherine were moving their family out. Not out of duty, not out of the institution, out of reach. What the world would soon call a simple relocation was actually the conclusion of something far more dangerous. A battle over the one thing the monarchy has never allowed to be negotiated. Who controls the next generation? And the confrontation that forced this move didn't involve protocol or public scandal. It involved a private ultimatum, a grandmother's ambition, and 3 children who had no idea they'd become the centre of a constitutional crisis. Before we go further, subscribe now so you never miss the untold stories shaping the royal family behind closed doors. The rupture didn't announce itself. For months, those inside the palaces noticed only small disturbances. Meetings that ended without agreement, schedules revised quietly, requests for coordination politely declined, then declined again. Catherine felt it first. Not because she was looking for conflict, but because she'd learned to recognise the specific silence that follows when someone oversteps a boundary they didn't know existed. It happened during what should have been an ordinary conversation about the children's upcoming commitments. Camilla had suggestions, William had his own plans. The Queen Consort, still adjusting to a title she'd waited decades to claim, pressed gently, then less gently, for what she called alignment across the family. William's response was carefully neutral, but Catherine saw the muscle work in his jaw, the deliberate slowness of his words. Later, when they were alone, he told her the truth. She's not asking anymore, she's positioning. The British monarchy runs on an unspoken agreement. The present sovereign rules, the future heir prepares, and nobody discusses what happens when those two realities collide. But Camilla had changed the equation. Not maliciously, not even consciously perhaps, but after years of being excluded, criticised, and barely tolerated, she now stood beside the king with full authority. And she intended to use it. Her argument, when she made it to those who would listen, was entirely reasonable. The monarchy needed coherence. The Wales family couldn't function as a separate court. The next generation, especially George, had to be shaped with institutional continuity in mind. And someone, she believed, had to coordinate that vision. What she didn't say, but what William understood perfectly, was who she believed that someone should be. 3 weeks before the move became public, a meeting took place in a private office overlooking Windsor's East Terrace. Present, William, Camilla, 2 senior advisors. Absent, Catherine, deliberately. Charles, conveniently. The subject was George, specifically what Camilla called providing the young prince with proper ceremonial foundations. She arrived with a folder. William arrived with a single question. Who asked for this meeting? The silence that followed told him everything. Camilla opened the folder anyway. Inside were proposals, modest on the surface, seismic underneath, about integrating George more formally into state occasions, assigning him private tutorials on constitutional history, and establishing what she termed next-generation working groups. All of it is supervised, all of it coordinated, all of it, William realised, designed to give Camilla a formal voice in his son's preparation for a role that wouldn't begin for decades. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. George is 9 years old, his future is not a committee project. Camilla stiffened. With respect, his future is the only thing this family exists to protect. Then we agree, William said quietly, which is why I'll be protecting it. That night, Catherine found her husband standing alone in the children's corridor, door open, watching George sleep. She didn't ask what had happened. She already knew, because 2 hours earlier she'd received a call, routed through a lady-in-waiting, phrased with painful courtesy, asking whether the Princess of Wales had been informed of recent household discussions regarding the young prince. The call wasn't meant to inform. It was meant to test whether William had told her, which meant someone inside their circle was reporting outward. Catherine felt something shift inside her that had nothing to do with royal tradition or institutional duty. She was a mother. And someone was manoeuvring around her children. When William finally spoke, his voice was flat. We can't stay here. Forest Lodge had been discussed before. Casually, hypothetically, the way royal families talk about properties and the way others talk about weekend plans. It sat within Windsor Great Park, close enough to maintain proximity to the working heart of the monarchy, far enough to create actual separation. Privacy, yes, But more than that, control. Their own gate, their own stuff, their own rhythm. And, though neither said it aloud at first, their own boundaries about who had access to their children. Catherine walked the property alone before they made the final decision. It wasn't grand, it wasn't historic, it was theirs. When she returned, William was waiting. "If we do this," she said carefully, "we can't pretend it's just about the house." "I know." "Your father will see it as choosing sides." "I know." "And Camilla will see it as war." William looked at her for a long moment. "Then they'll both be wrong, because this isn't about them." Charles was told in person, not by staff, not by statement. William requested a private audience, and for once his father granted it immediately. They met in the king's study, the same room where Charles himself had once stood as a young father, navigating his own impossible balancing act. William didn't begin with accusations. He began with a question. "Do you believe I'm ready to be king?" Charles looked startled. "Of course. When the time comes, then trust me to prepare my son the same way you tried to prepare me." The king said nothing. William continued, measured but unyielding. "I'm not rejecting the institution. I'm not abandoning duty. But I will not allow my children's futures to be managed by anyone outside this room except Catherine. Camilla isn't trying to—" "Yes, she is." The silence was brutal. Charles aged a decade in 10 seconds because he knew his son was right. And he knew his wife wouldn't see it that way. And he knew that choosing between them meant fracturing something that might never heal. Finally, quietly, the king spoke. "Where will you go?" "Forest Lodge." Charles nodded slowly. "I won't stop you." It wasn't approval, but it was permission. And in that moment, the future of the British monarchy quietly separated from its present. Camilla found out, not from Charles, but from the household briefing that appeared on her desk the following morning. She read it twice, then she went to find her husband. "You allowed this," Charles, sitting with correspondence he could no longer focus on, didn't look up. "I allowed my son to raise his children as he sees fit. He's isolating himself, isolating them, and you're endorsing it." "I'm accepting it." Camilla's voice cracked, not with anger, but with something worse, hurt. "I have spent years trying to serve this family, and the moment I try to help shape its future, I'm treated like a threat." Charles finally met her eyes. "You're not a threat, but you're not their parent, and neither am I anymore." When the announcement was made, the media framed it predictably. Cambridges choose privacy. William and Catherine opt for family focus. New chapter for Wales family. All true, all incomplete, because what the public saw as a tasteful withdrawal was actually a declaration. The next King of England had just established his own household, his own authority, and his own vision for the monarchy he would one day lead. And he'd done it while his father was still on the throne. Constitutional experts noted the move's historical echoes quietly. Predecessors who'd created distance, heirs who'd built separate courts, fractures that sometimes healed, and fractures that never did. George asked only once why they were moving. Catherine knelt down, brushed the hair from his eyes, and told him the truth in the only way a 9-year-old could understand. "Because home should feel like home, and we're going to make sure it does." He accepted this without question, the way children do when they trust the adults around them. Charlotte wanted to know if she'd have her own room. Louis wanted to know if they could get a dog. And William, watching his children adapt with the effortless resilience of the young, felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight for months. They weren't running, they were choosing. 6 weeks after the move, Catherine found William standing in the same spot he'd stood the night of the confrontation, watching George sleep. But this time, he wasn't tense. He was still. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "I regret that it was necessary, but no." She stepped beside him, their shoulders touching. "Camilla called today." William's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. "She asked if the children could visit for tea next month. Just tea, no agenda." "What did you say?" "I said we'd think about it." William exhaled slowly. "That's more generous than I'd have been." Catherine smiled faintly. "I'm not being generous, I'm being strategic. Because one day George will be king, and he'll need to understand that family is complicated, institutions are imperfect, and boundaries aren't the same as walls." William turned to look at her. "When did you get so wise?" "When I married a man stubborn enough to pick a fight with a queen. History will record the Windsor separation as a footnote. A residential change, a family preference. But those who understand the monarchy's true architecture will recognise it for what it was. The moment the future king drew a line. Not against his father, not against the institution, but around the one thing that no title, No tradition and no ambition could be allowed to touch. His children's right to grow up protected, prepared, and free from the weight of crowns they weren't yet ready to carry. William didn't reject the succession, he redefined it, and in doing so, he made a quiet promise to George, Charlotte, and Louis, one that no decree or document could ever formalise. You will inherit the crown. But first, you get to be children. Forest Lodge wasn't a retreat. It was a revolution. And the monarchy would never be the same. If this story gave you a new perspective on the royals, hit that like button and subscribe, because the most important battles are always the ones that happen behind closed doors.